boom. And they came onto us with batons and so on. They assaulted us. It's then decided that I must accompany Kgalema and Tasha to go and convey this decision.
So you were there to convey?
Of course. Of course.
What was that meeting like? I mean, to the extent that you can share. I mean,
it was like a complaint session. I detect deep-seated hatred directed at President Ramaphosa. And I think that's why it became possible for President Zuma to leave the ANC.
Spread the fire. Welcome back to SMWX, and today I am privileged, honored, and extremely excited to be joined by what is certainly the best guest for me that we have ever had on this platform. A former president, a unionist, a freedom fighter, and a thinker, a South African icon, President Kgalema Motlanthe. President Motlanthe, what an honor to have you on this platform.
Good afternoon. The honor is all mine, Sizwe.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
You were born in Alexandra. Tell us about some of your earliest memories which had a formative effect on your life from childhood.
Well, you know, being born in Alexandra Township was not under a municipality. It was run by a three-man health committee. And you know, it was a freehold area at the time. People bought plots and developed bonded rooms on those plots, which they rented out. So real estate those days was actual, you know, lucrative business. So we on average, you could find in a yard anything upward of 8 families living in the same yard, because these bonded rooms were occupied by families. And Alexandra being a catchment area in a cosmopolitan city of Johannesburg had people from all over the world there, all over the world. I mean, we lived with people from Zimbabwe, people from Malawi, and all over South Africa, basically. So that kind of environment made us, you know, accept that we are all Africans, and also to learn to speak all languages. I mean, you know, so I'm at home with all African languages, basically.
So you can speak basically every language?
Every language, yes. Because of that environment, that background. I mean, we grew up, you know, together, playing together, and you registered at the nearest school, and the nearest school may be teaching Zulu. So in my early years there, I learned Sesotho, so, you know, because that's the language, that was the medium of instruction. Following the forced removals, so by 1959, I was about 10 then. We were moved to Meadowlands in Soweto. And we get to Soweto, register at the nearest school, and they teach Setswana. So I learned Setswana. Yeah, you know, formally. I mean, not like picking up a few terms here and there. Yeah. So that's the environment, you know. That's how we grew up, and of course the Bantu education was introduced as we were, you know, getting into school at the time. because it was introduced in 1953. Up to that point, the schools were run by missionaries. So each religious denomination had its own school. You had, Roman Catholic schools, Presbyterian schools, Anglican schools, Dutch Reformed schools, and so on. So I was, because my parents were, worshipping at an Anglican church, so I was enrolled at an Anglican school called St. Michael's in Alexander Township. And when Bantu education was introduced, because the whole approach of Dr. Verwoerd at the time was that they would shut down the missionary schools and create public schools. And so they trained teachers. They took over teacher training colleges from missionaries, and they trained teachers who would teach Bantu education. If you want to get a sense of the impact of Bantu education, really, the best reference is Trevor Huddleston's book, Not For Your Comfort, because there's a chapter where he deals with Bantu education, and it's entitled Education for Servitude. And Dr. Verwoerd, he quotes him when he was piloting this bill through Parliament, that he says, the black child has no need for mathematics because he'll have no use for such knowledge in future. And Trevor Huddleston says the impact of Bantu education was going to affect the generations to come of Africans. And so in the same book, Not For Your Comfort, he also deals with forced removals, by the way. And the chapter on it he calls Till There Be No Place. Till there be no place, because the freehold areas which were walking distance to places of work were declared as black spots in white men's towns, so to speak. And the forced removals were, Prospect Township, Sophia Town. Alexander Township remains what it is because it's a catchment area. So as they move people out, by day, by night, new people come. So they never really got to a point where they had to flatten it.
Absolutely. It was a fascinating insight to me because in high school I ended up attending St. John's.
I see.
And just thinking about the incredible life stories of people in our country, someone like you whose father was a laborer there and transcended to the presidency of the country. Did you ever visit the school, and what are your memories of your father, and what lessons did he impart on you?
Well, from St. John's, he went on to work for a bakery called Queen's Bakery. And thereafter, he ended up at Anglo-American head office. And he worked there until he retired. One thing about him was that he, without failure, every day he got a copy of the Rand Daily Mail and the Star.
Wow.
Every day. So, other than, church literature, one had access to newspapers on a daily basis. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. No, that's incredible. You, of course, then become involved in activism from a relatively early age, and tell us about how you were brought into the struggle against apartheid and ANC underground structures as well?
Well, just one step before we get to that part. So I also served as an altar boy in the Anglican Church. I was a server. And that, brought me into contact with the Christ the King in Sophia Town. So as I said, in 1959 were removed from Alex to Meadowlands. And so there was no Anglican church in Meadowlands. We had to worship at Christ the King in Sophia Town. Now, Christ the King is where Trevor Huddleston was the parish priest there.
Right.
And that's where he did incredible work. I mean, literally, those days, I must always remember to give you context. So those days where we had to write 3 external exams before you get to matric. So you wrote an exam and actually got a certificate for it in standard 6. Once you passed standard 6, which qualified you to get into secondary.
I see.
And secondary then was Form 1, 2, and 3. So at Form 3, you also wrote an external exam where you got a certificate, which was called junior certificate, which qualified you to then go into matric, which is Form 4 and Form 5. In a sense, Trevor Huddleston used to send countless boys to boarding school once they've passed standard 6. So they would go and do their secondary education in boarding schools. And then, of course, he was also in charge of St. Peter's in Rosettenville, which was regarded at that time as the college, taking care of the secondary and high school. Many prominent South Africans are products of St. Peter's College. Oliver Tambo did his high school education there, went to Forte, came back to teach at St. Peter's. So Trevor Huddleston was in charge of that. But his parish was the Sophia Town parish at Christ the King.
Right.
He was a member of the Community of the Resurrection.
Right.
So these are priests who took vows of celibacy. And so they lived at the mission. So at first the mission was in Sophia Town, that whole prison. Well, Christ the King is still there. It's the only Christ the King, Dr. Kluma's family home, and what was really a reformatory are the 3 structures which survived the destruction of Sophia Town.
Wow.
Everything else was pulled down. I mean, Dr. Kluma's house was regarded by the apartheid government as fit for, white habitation. So that's why it was preserved. It was never demolished. And the church was bricked up. It wasn't used as a place for worship until after the unbanning of political organizations and so on. But I was saying that that's where we had to worship, and even serve as servers and so on, and then a new church was then built in Meadowlands, which was called the Church of the Resurrection. So the congregants of old Christ the King were now worshiping there. Of course, others ended up in places like Rockville and so on, so they had to worship in other churches. But the majority of people who are settled in Meadowlands came from Sofia Town and Alexander Township and Western Native Township. Yeah. So the members of the Community of the Resurrection were ministered in the townships. They were white, they came from England. And as servers, we, from time to time, even during school holidays, we ended up, spending school holidays either at St. Peter's in Rosettenville or going to another mission, in the border next to Lesotho, or Velgespreid in Roodepoort West. So, and then you observe at close range these white men who wash their own dishes. The only help they needed was a lady who did their washing, their laundry, and their cooking. They dished up for themselves, they washed the dishes and so on. So it had an impression on one that whites in South Africa do no manual labor. And so this was a strange breed, you see, so they had an impact. And I think that's where one's non-racialism comes from, because you then realize that, yes, there's racial discrimination, but not all whites subscribe to it. Because here was an example of, they walked into our homes and so on. It was an incredible experience, as it were. So when I'd passed standard 6, so they gave me a bursary to go to St. Christopher's in Swaziland. And because of that, my parents had to apply for a travel document for me. And with the help of the church and so on. And eventually, with a file this thick and a simple inscription on top that denied permission to a travel document and therefore have to continue studies in South Africa. Yeah. So that was an early brush with the establishment at the time. So and of course, in those days, when you turned 16, you had to apply for a pass. It's called a pass, but in Sizwe Banzi's date, they explain in very simple terms the impact of a pass on an African male, because you had to carry the pass, you had to carry it on your body all the time, because the police had the right to stop you and ask you to produce your pass. Now, you needed a pass because it monitored your movements. So if you were still at school, the school principal during school holidays would have to give you a letter stating that you are a student. Otherwise, you'd be, because what the police look out for in your pass was a work seeker's permit. A work seeker's permit, because all blacks were regarded as temporary sojourners in a white man's town. Yeah, you didn't belong. You had no right to be there, other than, so the work seeker's permit was a confirmation that you are there whilst under the employ of such and such a company. It was actually stamped and written in there. So your employer's details would be in the pass. Or if you were moving in between jobs, then it would say that's why it was called a work seeker's permit. The folks in the townships called it a special. A special. If you didn't have a special, the police had a right to arrest you. And then if you are arrested for failing to produce a pass, either because it's somewhere in your jacket in your workplace and you thought you were going across to buy a pie, that's it. They won't allow you to go and fetch it. So you appear in numbers, hundreds of people for pass offenses. Either it's failing to produce, or you don't have the special. If you produce, you don't have the special. So if you don't have the special and therefore you are not employed, the charge would be loaferskap. In other words, you are a won't work, not that you are unemployed. Yeah, so the charge should be that you are a won't work. You're a lumpen, so to speak. And that's how the Afrikaner farmers were supplied with cheap prison labor. So you'd all appear, hundreds of you there, and how you plead. If you say, no, I'm not pleading guilty, you are remanded. So you prolong your detention. And then, of course, if you plead guilty, 6 months. And then the farmers are waiting at the back so they can get, cheap labor for next to nothing. That's how, when we deal with the rise of Afrikaner capital, was a critical input, this prison labor. Yeah. So in a sense, we didn't have to join politics. Politics found us because every step of the way you were subjected. You live with your parents, and then there was what was called a blue card, which was a register of who is part of this family, who lives here in this address. And the municipality police had the right to knock at the door at ungodly hours to find out if there aren't people who are not supposed to be there. So if you have a cousin of yours visiting, you must inform the superintendent. Otherwise, he's going to fall foul of the law. Yeah. So it's those living conditions which, in a sense, politicized us. That you get to know that no, this can't be right. And then, of course, we had shortwave radio, and the ANC and the PAC once fortnightly, every Wednesday at 9:30, alternated with the external affairs of Radio Tanzania. So we then get a message. So we used to ensure that you are next to your shortwave radio at that time to tune in. And the message was from the ANC was, sons and daughters of the motherland, wherever you are, organize those around you. That was the message here. Yeah.
Can you talk us through your life in the underground structures and the events that led up to your conviction, which led to the Robben Island years?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we ended up working for the Johannesburg City Council in what was called the commercial department. We were running bottle stores in the townships. And I'm saying running because we were in charge. There was no white man. The bottle store supervisor and deputy supervisor and the cashiers and all of that were all black.
Right.
And so the council had a team of auditors, white auditors, who came to check the books, end of each month and so on. And running the bottle store was simple. I mean, we could take stock and balance the books every day. Yeah. So and the whole idea was that if there's a surplus, you remove it. If there's a shortage, you try and find the causes of that and you remedy that. So our books always balanced, and it gave us a measure of control over our working conditions and all of that. And so we then and there's a whole lot of my contemporaries who worked with us there, and we were all in a sense able to find each other, the ones who were politicized and so on. And that's how we formed units. I mean, I was sent to Mozambique because we were trying to find a way to Tanzania.
Right.
And we thought, well, if we go to Lorenzo Marx and up, we end up in Dar es Salaam. So I, with contacts, I stayed with the family in Matola. Matola was still a semi-village. Only to be informed once I get there that the Mozambicans, the Frelimo people, when they want to go to Tanzania, they come to South African mines.
Interesting.
And live from the South African mines through Botswana and Zambia at the time, or northern Rhodesia into Tanzania. So my mission in that way was unsuccessful, but at least we had because the colonies at the time had what we call from pit to pot, where there were minerals. So there were no networks, whether road networks or rail networks, which connected, if you take a country like Mozambique, which connected the south to the north. Nothing Incredible. Of the sort. So that's why they had to come to the mines in South Africa to be able to go up to. And when you look at the map, I mean, it's actually contiguous. So you think it's easier just to go that way. No, there were no roads, no rail, nothing, because of this from pit to port, model of mining, because mining is what brought about infrastructure, road and rail infrastructure. Yeah. So we because we were always in search of the contacts for the ANC. My next trip was to Old Rhodesia, Southern Rhodesia. I go to Bulawayo, I stay with the family there. In fact, Kaiser Chiefs had a manager called Edward Nene. I stayed with his mother. His mother was married to a gentleman, Proud Kumalo, who was from Bulawayo in Popoma Township. So I stayed with his mother, Edward's mother. And then I went up to Salisbury, which is Harare now. And there I stayed with another South African who had been in King Kong, the musical.
Wow.
Who actually was the leader of the group to which Letambulu belonged as a young girl, James Mabena. And from there I went to Mtari, a place called Penalonga. Again, trying to find a route to Dar es Salaam. And that also, didn't work out, so I had to retrace my steps back through Botswana, back to Johannesburg. Eventually, because the ANC established a network in Eswatini, in Swaziland. So, because there were South Africans who were, either teaching and so on. The late Stan Mabizela was a teacher there in St. Christopher's. Yeah. So once we made contact with that route, we were now safe, to work with the ANC. And we were eager to go out for military training. And then we were told, no, you've searched for the route for so long. Now that you have it, if you all leave, then, many others will not have the channel or the route. So we agreed that some would have to leave, and so the late Stan Nkosi, myself, and General Spiwe Nyanda were instructed to remain, and so we had to take the rest of the machinery out. And they left for military training. Eventually, Spiwe Nyanda also, his cover was close to being blown, so he had to leave, and only the two of us remained. And our instruction was that we should now establish sabotage units and train. So we received, elementary training in how to handle explosives, how to make incendiary bombs, and so on and so forth.
And if I'm not mistaken, that instruction came from a certain Mr. Jacob Zuma?
No. Jacob Zuma was there. It came from Joseph Nduli. Joseph Nduli had been in the Wangi operation, was trained in the whole Soviet Union, is the only one of those who were involved in the Wangi and Sipolilo operations, who was able to successfully come back into South Africa.
Wow, I see.
Yeah.
So,
and from here, he then went to Swaziland and settled in Swaziland.
I see.
Yeah.
So where did Mr. Zuma's involvement come in? Because I read in
when we were having one meeting with at St. Christopher's underground with Joseph Nduli, and Jacob Zuma was there.
Wow.
Yeah. So we had an interaction and engagement, and that's when we came back with TNT, which is an explosive.
Yeah.
Yes. To now establish the sabotage units.
So things were getting more serious than the
more
struggle was
serious,
intensifying.
more serious, yes, more serious. And then, of course, in Swaziland, a group from Mlazi in Natal, which was recruited by the late Joseph Nduli. The other one was Joseph Nduli. So Joseph Nduli is one of those people who were killed in detention.
Right.
Because the security police, once they arrested you, they would torture you and try and extract information within the first 24 hours. Because if the underground convention was that if we meet on set days and you are not there and there's no explanation, it's a red flag. It means all the others must either take cover or get out of town. So the late Joseph Mdluli had recruits, about 6 of them. So he takes them in a kumbi, they get into Swaziland, he hands them over to the ANC structures, Buduma and the others in Babani. And these chaps, it turns out that their impression was that they were going for employment or something like that. So they don't show the discipline of recruits who understand the purpose, you see. So they wander around Manzini and even went to the police, the Swati police, to say, no, we sent here, we are looking for work and so on and so on. And the Swati police at the time were a desk of the South African police, you see. So they then informed the South African police. And out of the information they gave as to who recruited them, they then go to arrest Joseph Mdluli.
Right.
And within 24 hours, they'd killed him in detention. But the security police now had information of a network.
Sure. So they knew where you were.
In Natal, not us.
I see.
Yes. And then they set a trap for Joseph Mdluli.
Right.
So they go with the driver of the Kumbi. Joseph Mdluli was not a driver himself. I mean, he always hired a driver. So they go with so they detain the driver, who then explains how they take people out and so on. And literally a Kumbi load of white security police with darkened faces goes, they drive and they go to the border at the fence. And the driver goes out and he gives the signal. And on the other side is Joseph Mdluli and Cleophas Dlamini. Now, Cleophas Dlamini had gone into exile, was in SAC 2, so had gone into exile in 1964. Now we're talking 1975, 76. So the two of them then inquire from the driver, how's Joseph Mdluli was known as Mkutuzi. So they say, how's Mkutuzi? No, he says, no, he assures them, no, he's fine, and da-da-da-da-da. He sent me, I've got the boys in the Kumbi. Let me bring the Kumbi closer to the fence. And he goes and he brings the Kumbi closer to the fence. And as they were anticipating, a load of recruits, this security police jump the fence, they apprehend them, bring them over the fence. And that's how Joseph Mdluli was arrested.
Right.
So all of this is unknown to us until it turns out that as they were torturing him and interrogating him, he remembered, because he was in conversation with Stan, because my colleague,
right?
And got to know Stan's real name. Now we were using pseudonyms at the time, and so the police then sent word to Stan's father. So they don't alarm him. They engage and so on. And then they invite, so Stan was serving articles in a law firm in Johannesburg. So they invite Stan to come and see them. And, without raising any alarm and so on. And as they were interrogating him, they then mentioned these TNT explosives. So he says he reacted. And that's how we get arrested, you know. It's all one thing leading to another. And we didn't know what had happened until, so Joseph Nduli, they arrest him and they charge him with Dlamini, with Harry Gwala. So there was a trial in Pietermaritzburg involving former Robben Islanders who came out, and now they were arrested. Harry Gwala was accused number one, so they included them in that trial. And we didn't know. By that time, we were on Robben Island. Until they arrived on Robben Island, then we say, oh. So we see Joseph Nduli for the first time, and he's the one who explains to us what actually happened. You see, So,
What are your memories of arriving on the island for the first time?
Well, before we got to the island, whilst we were at Leeuwkop, at some point, there was a group of us. I mean, so at some point, the authorities say, no, we must now go out because we are sentenced to, there's a quarry at Leeuwkop prison, you know, to crush stones into small sizes. So we go there, and we get there, they've created a fence for us. So we are secluded from the rest of the Leeuwkop prisoners, where, you know, in a small enclosure, and we are breaking these stones into smaller stones and so on. One of the prisoners brings us a newspaper covering the trial of Joe Gabi and Tokyo Sehwale and them in Pretoria.
Right.
So he brings us this newspaper. And because, you know, whenever we went back from the work, they never searched us. So we hide it and we think, no, we'll read it when we are inside. So we take it with us. That day, they never searched us. They simply said they are going to search each one of us. Now, we had read the Prison Act. The Prison Act says if you are to be strip searched, that can't happen in front of other prisoners. So it has to be like, you know, in a secluded area. So we raise objections on those bases. And they don't argue with us. What does they say? No, take them to the major's office. So off we are shepherded to the major's office. We get to the major's office. He's in his office. So we line up in the corridor outside. And then a penny drops that, you know what, we've been set up here. So we literally tear up the newspaper, we eat it, because, you know, the prison offices are kept speckless. I mean, there's 2 or 3 prisoners cleaning the corridor all day long. I mean, so you can't hide nothing there and so on. So we literally ate the newspaper.
Wow.
By the time the major is waiting for all the prisoners to be locked up and for the prison to close, because they must now come to us, all of them. It's the entire team of warders. So by the time he says no, go down. You know, so we're going to the cell. We get into the cell. The entire prison is closed. They are all there with dogs and so on. And they repeat the order that they want to search us. So we said, well, it can't happen in front of other prisoners and so on. And you know, he just turned back like that. We didn't even know that they were there in their numbers. So he just turned back and said, boom. and they came onto us with batons and so on. They assaulted us. At the end, they turned the cell and everything upside down. But they couldn't find the newspaper. Yeah, the newspaper had disappeared at that time. But they beat us up to come and nice, yeah. So I then received a visit on Saturdays. The warders who were in charge of the visits were, if it's on a Saturday, at Leeuwkop, the last prisoner who receives the dish of porridge for breakfast is immediately followed by the first one who's collecting lunch, the same for lunch. And the last one in the queue is followed by the first one for supper. So by 2:00, you are all locked up, you've had your 3 meals, and that's it. The warders are gone, they're going to watch rugby. You see? So even the visits, they in a sense try to bargain that it shouldn't be long. A visit was about 30 minutes. So I was also just keen to convey the message that we've been assaulted, we need a lawyer. Yeah. And I convey the message, and so they go and inform Raymond Tucker was our attorney.
See.
Yeah, so Raymond Tucker then makes an application to come and see us, and they block him. And they say, no, he can't see us. Yeah, they can't see us. Because, the prison system is a West system, you can come across here. Because they have control over what goes out by way of communication and so on. So they did that to us and immediately arranged for our transfer to Robben Island. Yeah, without Tucker seeing us. But of course, we were determined. So upon arrival on Robben Island, the last brief, what they call a last brief, informs them that we were troublemakers, basically. So the ones there are saying, yeah, you're welcome, now you've come to a real prison, yeah. That nonsense of yours must come to an end and so on. So we say, okay, we'll include you in the charge we're going to open.
Wow.
Yeah.
So from the get-go, you were very clear about...
We were very clear. And indeed, so we laid charges. Eventually, after 3 years of toing and froing, by then we had lawyers from Cape Town. Raymond Tucker had, informed them. So we continued with the case. Eventually, after 3 years, because now some of the people we are listing are transferred to other prisons, some are in Namibia and so on. So they have to bring them all together to appear in court. So they said, no, they want to settle out of court. And the lawyers then say to us, well, this is the best outcome. You must accept the settlement because anyway, the money is needed for the defense of other detainees and so on. So we were all given a 210 rand settlement at the time. And of course, it went into the pool of the South African Council of Churches. Yeah, for other, but at least, so that was our arrival on Robben Island. Yeah, we were clear that this is hostile territory, and we're not going to receive any special treatment. Yeah.
And you were on Robben Island for 10 years.
For 10 years, yes. Except that at some point, I was taken to a prison in inland prison, which is a farm colony, and then to Polsmo, and then back to the island. There was a hunger strike, and we were in the coordinating committee, and one day they just picked us, and others were sent to Pretoria and so on. So I end up at Portsmouth prison, of course joined by my younger comrades who had been arrested, and some came from Umlazi, others from Soweto, and so on. And after a while, we were all taken back to the island here. Otherwise, all my that was for less than a year.
What was it like on Robben Island, and what were some of the memories of the most difficult parts?
Well, one of the advice one had received from the late Joe Kabi was that, if you, for whatever reason, end up on Robben Island, two things you must avoid. Craving for good things. Because there are no good things. There's no good food or whatever. And then secondly says gossip. If you avoid these two things, you'll sail through with no problems here.
Wow.
Yeah. So one followed that, advice to the letter. Yeah.
How did you avoid craving for just the normal pleasures of life that you were denied for so long?
It's not there. It's not available to you, and that's it. You might as well come to terms with that up front. So the diet for prisoners was classified according to race. We had no white prisoners, but we had colored and Indian prisoners with us on Robben Island. And they got different diet from us. So we got what was called the F diet. F diet, yes, which means for breakfast you get a dish of porridge, and that's it. With a mug of coffee, pre-sweetened. Somebody somewhere has already put the sugar in there and stirred it, and that's what you get. So, and just the sight of seeing fellow prisoners pouring the black coffee onto the porridge to try and make it palatable made me realize that no, you know what, this is not on at all. And then when we get that, so the colored and Indian prisoners get a quarter loaf of bread. In prison lingua franca, it's called a katkop. A cat's head. So they get that, and they also get a cup of milk. Then for lunch, we get boiled millie. So they take it off the cob,
right?
And when it is hard, I mean, like it can be seed or something, seedlings. So for us they boil it. It's called inkobe. In its course. So they boil it, and that's what we get for lunch. And in a mug, an aluminum mug, it's 3/4 full. It's not full. They don't fill the mug. So you wage a struggle for the mug to be full. But by the time you are done with these 3/4, your jaws really don't want anything else here. Because it's so hard. I mean, you chew and chew. Then that's it. That's your lunch. So when we get that, the Indian and colored prisoners get meal rice or semp. Then for supper, it's again a dish of porridge, soft porridge. On certain occasions, it's a mug of a head of a fish. That's your relishment. And or the best days when you'd get 4 boiled eggs and 2 raw carrots with the soft porridge. So the boiled eggs are your relishment. And sometimes in place of carrots, it's telep. Yes. And the Indian and colored prisoners get a katkop and a mug of meat. Yeah.
Do you have memories of coinciding with? I know that apparently you had a good relationship with Govan Mbeki, Mandela himself. Did you coincide on the island with him or have any interactions with those two? And what are your memories of those?
Well, we had the ANC had a structure in all sections, and so B section is where the Rivonia trialists were kept. And those are single cells. And then later, A section was created, and that's where people like Harry Gwala and the Black Consciousness Leadership, Seth Cooper, Strini Motley, and the others were kept in that. These were also single cells. C section was for punishment. If you were identified as a transgressor of any rule that exists in the head of a warder, and they punish you. The punishment in prison was that it's about food, actually. They just say, no, 3 malte, that's all. It means you've already had your 3 meals. Yeah. So you go into C section, and that's it. That's it. There's no procedure or anything like that. It's just the handing down of the penalty. Yeah. So the ANC had structures. So the high organ, which was the leadership structure, was in B section. And then we had what we called DCs, which is really disciplinary committees in each section. So we were always in communication, organizationally, that is. And that's why it was possible to organize political education, it was possible to circulate material. I mean, the B section leadership, because they had been there for longer and were sentenced to life imprisonment, so they would register, to study, and through that they look at prescribed works and recommended. If a book appears on a footnote, they apply for it. So UNISA sends the book, and you have a week before you send it back. So part of what we used were those kinds of books, and we transcribed them into 3 choir notebooks. Those with legible handwritings would, do it 24-hour continuous operation. But you have to do it such that you paginate, you reflect footnotes. So it's like the textbook reproduced. And as you are doing the master copy, you are also doing a copy for circulation. Yes. So the people who need the book for study purposes could still use the notebook for study purposes because it's properly paginated and footnotes are there and so on. And then, of course, so you have to laminate each page to preserve it of the master copy. And you go and bury it in a dead letter box because, there's no security. Anytime there's a strip search, they come and one of the things they take is books. But they had no suspicion of political economy books or philosophy books, Marxism, and so on. Those books they just put aside. It's the ones that refers to a black horse or a black this or that they impound those ones here.
Wow.
So most of the books survived in that way. Yeah.
Did you ever see and were you able to speak to Mandela when he was on Robben Island? Or
Yes. Yes. We had a system. So the rest in the general sections, we were in the general sections. We also had, through the intervention of the Committee of the Red Cross, International Committee of the Red Cross, there were workshops. So some people were, supplied with machines to do tailoring and produce overalls and prison cap and so on. And others were doing carpentry, so the furniture of the warders was fixed there and so on. And others were glaziers and painters. So if you needed to go to B section, the comrades in B section would create a need for a carpenter or a painter to come there.
Right.
And then that's how you go there. And if you are going for consultation, it meant that you go together with someone who would be doing the work whilst you are in a meeting. And so we had a way of working around the system and so on. And that's how we were able to meet with the leadership from time to time. Yes. Omgov, when he was released from prison, whenever he was in Johannesburg, he stayed with me.
Wow.
Yeah, whether in transit or going to Europe, or when he returned, he stayed with me. Yeah.
Sam, I just wanted to interrupt this episode to let you know the 4 ways you can help SMWX. Way number 1, you can invite me to speak at your institution or company. Way number 2, you can advertise on this channel. Way number 3, you can become a member of this channel. The link to the membership is down below. And number 4, you can buy merch that's books or hoodies. Now let's get back to the episode. All our contact details are in the description box below. Upon your release, you didn't waste much time in getting back into activism. And it's interesting because many parts of your life come in 10-year phases. You then entered a very important phase towards the end of the late 80s of trade union activism in the National Union of Mine Workers. Talk us through that important formative phase. I think you came in 1987 or thereabouts.
Yes.
And there was one of the biggest mine workers strikes in the history of our country. Talk us through your memories of the NUM period and why you think that was an important part and phase of the struggle and the role you played there.
Well, when we were still in prison, we also had in the leadership former leaders of SAC2, and some of them with active experience and so on. People like Billionaire, Omgov himself. So they explained to us how difficult it is to organize mine workers. In fact, Mgov's approach was that because they are recruited from villages, was that they should be organized and recruited before they leave the village. So by the time they get to the mine compound, they are already, structured organizationally.
Interesting.
That, of course, never happened that way. But, the difficulty of organizing the mining industry was always underlined. So before we left prison, the advice was that we should go and reinforce organization of the mine workers. So we were released in the week when there was a railway strike. So we had to spend a week in Cape Town because we had to come up by train. And we, after a week, by the time we got to Johannesburg, the SARU strike was still on. And there was even a stay at home. So we went to Soweto, couldn't come back into town. The first day we came into town was at the end of the stay at home. So we had to go to the SACC, and then we had decided that we would also go and see the NUM leadership. At that time, their offices were in the same building with SARU, and so the SARU strike was on,
right,
and so on. So we go and we see Cyril Ramaphosa was the general secretary, with James Motlanthe was the president, and Elijah Bahai,
wow,
who was the vice president of the NUM. So we see the three of them, and Stan says, well, he will come in June, because we came out in April. Right. So he says, no, by June I would be able to come. So, because as I said, by the time of his arrest, he was serving articles. So he goes into the legal department. I go into the education department. So I say, no, by May, because we needed, remember now we have experience now. And our experience is that underground means you must be able to account for your time, you see. So you must be able to say, I'm employed and I go to work. And so the NUM's advantage was that consisted of these people recruited from labor forwarding villages across the length and breadth of the country, Eswatini, Botswana, Malawi, Mozambique. So it was an important network to get into. And then that was a period of collective bargaining negotiations. And so I get in May. By June, it was clear we're going for a deadlock in the negotiations. And indeed, there's a deadlock, and the strike happens. By July, it was the final touches into August. So my role then became to mobilize the strike support committees.
I see.
Yeah. So I had to make contact with South African medical democratic structures of doctors across, people like Faisal Randera in them.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah.
And at Wits, the University of Wits, we had student bodies who were fundraisers in support of the strike. And there were also suburban old ladies, led by an old lady called Faith MacDonald. She came from Scotland, who were supportive of this. So every day I had to go and give an update to students outside the Great Hall at Wits. Some were in the transport brigade, others housing and accommodation and so on. Because the union had no money, and we literally relied on this. But you see, the advantage was that for me, it helped me to, having been out of circulation for 11 years, basically, effectively, to then adapt and be in touch with activists at that time, which was in itself very, very helpful, because otherwise, it would have taken far much longer to find, contacts and who are the activists and so on. Yeah. So that's what the strike was able to do, and I basically was the coordinator of the strike support committee, and then there was an old member of the Communist Party of South Africa who was in the Central Committee, Willie Kalk. Willie Kalk every day brought a donation in plastic bag, for the in support of the strike. And then as the strike, reached, because the mines those days, each mine had its own private security company. Yeah. So workers, came to head office injured as they were scaling fences, some, with fractures and so on. And we had this network of doctors who could examine them and then, find accommodation for them, because the union couldn't afford anything else. So Faith MacDonald was coordinating the ladies in the suburbs who supported the strike. It was an incredible experience, I must tell you.
Absolutely. And that era, which you then subsequently led, taking over from current President Cyril Ramaphosa,
Yes.
who was the General Secretary,
Yes.
he handed over to you. You became the leader. And this was, in many ways, the high point of union activism in the country. And of course, when you become General Secretary, South Africa is fully on its way towards negotiations. And what are your memories of the negotiation in the CODESA period from your vantage point as General Secretary of the NUM? And I think you're also a provincial leader within the ANC as well.
Yeah, let me tell you what happened. So when the ANC got unbanned, we already had a network coordinated by Governor Mbeki. So he then worked out how we're going to organize legal structures for the ANC. And I was given the task to establish legal structures of the ANC in this province. It was called the PWV region. These were regions at the time. And so I had to establish an ad hoc working structure to organize and recruit and establish, constitute branches of the ANC. And that we did. We were able to hold a conference. I was elected as the chairperson of the province. Then because I was still doing also my daily work was in the NUM. So when the negotiations were to commence, I said to Dr. Sisulu that, look, we are many here in the ANC, In the Labour front, there's very few of us there. So I think I must not continue being the leader of this province. So at the next regional conference, I stepped down, remained on the committee, but so Tokyo became the chair. I then devoted more time because in '91, the General Secretary of the NUM, Cyril Ramaphosa, becomes the Secretary General of the ANC. And so the gap was bigger there. So I explained to Tatisulu, and Tatisulu agrees with me. And that's how I then go back to the NUM. Firstly, I act, as a holding general secretary, and then conference elects me. Marcel Golding becomes my deputy. And that's how we kept the NUM ship on even keel. So when CODESA started, I was clear that that's not for me to be there. The labor movement was very, very important. I must tell you, one of the things that the NUM came up with, as a resolution, was incredibly progressive. Because these mine workers who were lowly paid resolved that going forward, given the fact that May Day is now going to be a paid public holiday, workers must mark and celebrate that day by going to work on that day and persuading employers that the production for the day must go into an RDP fund.
Wow.
Yeah, that's... And then, of course, the resolution was taken to a COSATU conference, and at that conference, it was watered down a bit, but it was still very, very progressive. That instead of accepting that this is a paid public holiday, we stay away. We go to work and we donate the pay for that day.
Wow.
To an RDP fund, yeah. Yeah. So workers were like really committed to the need to reconstruct this country. And the mine workers, in many mining towns became mayors and so on. That network of the NUM worked very well in support of the cause. So CODESA happened. We were more of a reference group,
right,
than being directly involved in it. Yeah.
You've led such a storied life. We could talk about the NUM era for an hour. We could talk about Robben Island, but we haven't even got onto your ANC, your tenure in the ANC yet.
Yeah.
And I'd like to move there because then there was there was another important decade.
Yes.
From 97 to 2007, where you served as Secretary General of the ANC. Again, interestingly, following Cyril Ramaphosa.
Yes.
in that capacity. Can you talk us through your tenure as Secretary General, because it was such an interesting period in our history where you were at that crucial position. You served under President Mbeki at that time, all the way leading up to the fateful Polokwane conference. This was an incredible time for the ANC, where the electoral successes were just unprecedented. But there were also suggestions that you had been sidelined somewhat within the ANC compared to the power of the state, and the question of the party versus the state came to the fore. What are your reflections on your tenure as SG of the ANC at that critical moment in our country's history? And I believe that President Mandela approached you for that role and asked you specifically to consider it?
Well, yeah, remember, I go to the labor movement. I go to the NUM, coming out of the ANC. So that's why even when the unbanning happened, I'm given the task, whilst I'm in the NUM, to establish the legal structures of the ANC.
Sure.
And that happens, and then they are properly constituted. So when I became SG, it was in Mafike, and that's where Madiba stepped down as president of the ANC, but because he still had 18 months as head of state.
Yeah.
So at that conference, a special resolution was crafted and presented, read out to plenary, and it was adopted. And that special resolution basically motivated that, given Mandela's experience and knowledge in leadership, he should serve as ex officio member of all leadership structures of the ANC. So it was a special resolution read out to plenary, and it was unanimously adopted. And so our first task was going back to Shell House. Do we create an office for him, and so on? And Mandela, being Mandela, always said to us, no. Whenever I come to the office, I'll squat in your office. I don't need any other office because I don't want to crowd Thabo.
Wow.
So he was very clear and made us very clear about that. And as the Secretary General, part of my responsibility was to keep him posted on all organizational matters, the agendas and report backs continuously, because he was an experienced leader of the ANC and had to be kept posted so that he could guide and so on. Mondays are now, accepted as ANC days, even for those who are in government and so on. It starts with Mandela. Because when we came out of the Bloemfontein conference, Cyril was the SG. Cheryl became the deputy SG. With immediate effect, Cyril went to the Constituent Assembly. And so it was an absentee SG. And Cheryl had to hold the fort all by herself. And that's when Mandela realized that no, he must always give Cheryl that support.
Interesting.
And decided that every Monday, without fail, he would be there.
Wow.
So Cheryl could then, say, these are the difficulties, these are the difficult decisions needed, and then he would give the support and the guidance. So that worked very well, for us. And then, of course, after 18 months, he stepped down. We went into an election. President Mbeki became the president of the ANC. Me and President Mbeki used to, again, going by this tradition of meeting every Monday as officials.
Yeah.
And the NWC meets fortnightly. Every Monday, whether there's an NWC or not, we used to stay and discuss both organizational and government issues.
Wow.
Into the next morning. We would literally leave Lutuli House 2 a.m. on Tuesday morning.
Every single Monday. Every single
Every
Monday.
single Monday. Every single Monday. There's nothing we never discussed. We discussed everything about government and about the ANC. And the role of the Secretary General is to keep the organization together and ensure that the structures are properly constituted. So that's how we were able to, provide leadership, and that's what made it easier for me. I mean, even when following the Polokwane conference, the comrades exerted pressure on Comrade Mbeki that I should be included in government. And the excuse they were using was that no, there's need for manage the transition, the bridge and so on. And so essentially I said to them, no, that's not right. It's wrong politics, because you are communicating a message that we go to conference, we are elected as leaders, and the next step is for us to insert ourselves in government. How are we going to guide the lower structures if they do the same? If there's a regional conference and whoever is elected as the chair, the next month says, I must now be the district mayor, what are we going to say to them? So I was saying to them, no, it's wrong politics, we can't do it. They pressured. Eventually they said, no, okay, go to parliament. Yeah. So I said, no problem. So that's how I end up in parliament. I go to parliament around May of that year. And by July of that same year, I'm now a minister in the cabinet of President Mbeki without portfolio. By July. Yeah. Because that's when, these cases happen and so on. Yeah. And there was some eagerness. So I was the only one keeping in touch with President Mbeki. And yet, when I was handing over to Mantashe as the Secretary General, I actually took him to Mandela. I took him to Mandela and I said to him, and I said to Mandela, this is our new SG now, so he will keep you posted now. That's his responsibility and so on. And then we agreed that the same would happen to President Mbeki. But that wasn't happening. So literally, I even had to remind them that, look, it can't be right that I'm the only one among these officials who is in touch with President Mbeki. There's something amiss there. Anyway, so I served in that cabinet as a minister without portfolio in the presidency. So by September of the same year, September of the same year.
This is 2008 now.
This is 2007.
Oh, right.
2007. I go into parliament, I become a parliamentarian in May.
Right.
By July, I'm in cabinet.
I see.
And by September of that same year, if you recall, in 1 week, on a Thursday or Wednesday, Julius Malema was on television, and he says, Mbeki's history. Watch this space. There was an NEC coming. I don't know what had happened, but I got the distinct impression that some people involved him. I regarded him as a youth who needed, to be guided. But it was clear some people had discussed with him the fate of President Mbeki, because he pronounced on it before the National Executive Committee sat that very week.
Wow.
And so when the National Executive Committee sat to deliberate over these issues, and the Saturday, the meeting ended around 1:30, 2 a.m.
Wow. Yeah.
with the decision that President Mbeki must be recalled. And I'll tell you what had happened. Judge Nicholson gave a judgment and impugned that there was political interference in the Zuma matter.
Yeah.
And then in cabinet, the decision was taken that this judgment must be appealed. So, of course, the NPA had already given notice that it was going to appeal the judgment. And so that President Mbeki would then join that appeal. Of itself, I mean, the remark by Judge Nicholson was not a judgment. It was a remark in the judgment. That's why if it was a judgment, Cabinet would have had to dissolve itself if the determination was that, yes, this Cabinet interfered in a legal matter. But because it was a remark, not a determination, Cabinet continued. So we continued as Cabinet at the time. Yeah. However, the appeal processes were filed. Now, JZ, who was happy with the judgment of Nicholson and accepted it, got very upset that it was being appealed and interpreted that as a continuation of a fight against him. Was very, very upset. And this it's against that backdrop that the NEC then sits to decide and discuss whether President Mbeki, should be recalled or not. Now, the Constitution of the Republic stipulates the basis for a president to be removed from office. I think it's section 89 and so on. So all of those were not available to the NEC. So the NECs couldn't follow the Constitution, had to recall him as a member of the ANC. And so the NEC then comes to that decision that he must be recalled.
What was that meeting like? I mean, to the extent that you can share. I mean,
it was like a complaint session. Yeah, it was like a complaint session. I mean, each and every speaker saying how President Mbeki, affected him or her, one point or the other and so on. It was like a complaint session.
Wow.
Somewhere in my archives, I think I have copious notes about that NEC as to who said what.
Is that publicly available?
No, it's not publicly available.
I was going to say, I need to see
no,
this
it's not
archive.
Publicly available. Wow. But anyway.
One day we'll see it.
Anyway, at the end, the decision was that he must be recalled.
Yeah.
And then...
must have been such a
and this is like wee hours of the morning.
Wow.
So it's then decided that I must accompany Kgalema and Tasha to go and convey this decision.
Goodness. So you were there to convey.
Of course, because I was in the cabinet and so on. So I said fine. So we agree with Kgalema that no, we'll hit the road early in the morning around 6 to Pretoria to go and inform him. To my surprise, as I was driving to Pretoria that morning, I see posters. There was a newspaper that was established, a daily newspaper, which had some Nigerians in it. I remember whether it was called the Daily News or something like that. But all I remember is that Kgalema Brown was working for that newspaper. It was a newly established newspaper, in fact. So as we were going to Pretoria, I see the posters already of that newspaper, indicating that the NEC had taken a decision to recall Thabo Mbeki. So clearly, Kgalema Brown, may her soul rest in peace, received a call from people who were in that NEC for that newspaper. I think it was called Daily News or something.
Right.
Yeah, it didn't last actually. Anyway, we get to Pretoria, we see President Mbeki, and we convey the news. And
what was that like, if I might ask? I mean, what were your memories of having to actually tell him, and how did he take that news?
Well, he took it well. I mean, in a sense, I mean, I think, the writing was on the wall. He had read the writing very clearly and was, I think, psychologically prepared for it. Because we didn't have to, give explanations and so on. We just had to say, this is what the NEC has decided and so on. And that was it. Yeah, that was it. And then, of course, he then had to address the nation.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was it.
Yeah. Those were fateful days in our country.
They were.
Yeah.
They were. Yeah.
I remember I was in my first year of university and I was watching from my residence that resignation speech, and
yes,
it was the first time we'd ever seen a president resigning. And of course, you then became the president of the Republic soon after.
Well, for some reason, I suppose because, when I was SG, whoever was appointed by President Mbeki into cabinet, I was there. So we had a rapport, you see, with the ministers at the time. And so when it was decided that no, I must now step in. So we go to Parliament and the ANC. So there's no president. Remember, our system is that many people make the mistake that this president was elected by the people and so on. Our electoral system is proportional representation. So it's political parties which contest elections, not individuals. And so the president is elected by parliamentarians. So now there's a vacancy, there's no president. So parliament had to sit and then elect the next president. So I was then nominated, and Joe Seremani was also nominated from the DA. And so parliamentarians had to vote. And I got more votes than Joe Seremani. And that's how I became president. Yeah.
I'm curious in terms of two moments. What was it like for you when you were elected president in Parliament and suddenly, I'm sure you had considered it theoretically, but it dawns on you that you're the president of the Republic. And then what was it like after being elected, the first time you sat in the union buildings and actually exercised the power?
Well, I was elected in Cape Town because it's Parliament which elects you. So I'd gone in there in the morning. Remember when I was a minister without portfolio. So I'd gone in there in the morning to Parliament, having hiked a lift with Ben Martins. who was an old parliamentarian,
Yeah.
in his Chico. And then I come out, and there's a whole convoy,
Wow.
and about 19, protectors.
Yeah.
Yes. And one of the first things they asked for is my driver's license. So they took my driver's license. And from that day onwards, I've never had to drive a car.
Wow.
Yeah. So anyway, as I said, I'd been in cabinet. So the staff in the presidency, PICA's policy, structure, where there I knew everybody. I'd known everybody, and I knew everyone in cabinet, and so some of them, the cabinet ministers, for good reasons, actually said, look, we were appointed by President Mbeki into cabinet. So we can't assume that you are going to appoint us. So we got to leave, and then you can appoint a new cabinet. And I said, no. And some said, look, I've reached retirement age, I think I must leave, and so on. And it was fine. And so for those of them who left, I had to, on almost on the hoof, appoint replacements for them. And I had to take the chairs of portfolio committees, because those are the people who would be familiar with the issues, affecting the various portfolios. Yeah, so that's how I brought in people like Barbara Hogan and the others into cabinet to replace those ministers who decided to leave at the time. And as I said, for government to be effective, you need a professionalized bureaucracy. And that's what we had in the presidency at the time. And thanks God, they all stayed. No one, decided to quit at the time. And so the administrative arm and capacity was in place, and that's why it wasn't difficult for me to then manage that transition. Yeah, and I was also clear that, look, my task is to complete this term, which is based on, whose action plan is based on the manifesto and the 5-year action plan. So I had to complete that, and then organize the next election and supervise the next election. That was the transition. I was very clear that my focus is really to complete the term. Yeah.
Your presidency was a relatively short one.
Yeah.
Some say the shortest one was the best one.
Well,
Yeah.
in history, I've read in the Roman Empire history, there was an emperor called Cincinnatus, who was called and given dictatorial powers to sort out a problem. And he was in there for 5 months and sorted the problem and left for his farm afterwards. Yeah. The city of Cincinnati in the United States is named after him. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was the hardest moment of your presidency? And what was the most rewarding moment?
Well, there were issues. I mean, at the time, that were already set in motion. I mean, there was the issue of what you do with the people who were in prison and had to receive amnesty and so on. The other matter that was already set in motion was the issue of Advocate Vusi Pikoli. And there was also the issue of the scorpions.
Yeah.
These were issues that were on the table already when I got there. My task was to, like everything else, to complete that responsibility. Of course, these were not easy matters in themselves. And then, of course, the financial meltdown globally hit us at that time.
Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
But because there were reserves, you see, so we could, I had to convene, business, labor, civil society, to say, let's work out an approach to this financial meltdown and its impacts, because it was clear there were going to be job cutbacks and so on. And we had to come out with a scheme which could avoid that calamity. So there were difficult issues here. Those were very difficult. The other difficult issue was the issue of Omar Bashir, who had been charged. Remember, the convention is that when you have an inauguration of a president, you invite, heads of states on the continent. So we had to invite Bashir, and then we had to send him a note to say, because of your charges from the International Criminal Court, we are signatories to the Rome Statutes, and therefore would be obliged to arrest you if you came. So we got a very courteous letter of apology from him, and that's how we managed it here.
Wow.
Yeah.
Any other memories?
And yet, later, he came.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, absolutely.
When in fact, in the institutional memory, we had handled it differently.
Yeah. Any other memories of interactions with world leaders at the time?
Well, with immediate effect. Remember, this recall happens in September, which is the time for UNGA, UN General Assembly. So President Mbeki's Sherpa for that was Trevor Manuel. Trevor Manuel had already left for New York. Yes.
Wow.
When the recall happened. So President Mbeki couldn't follow. And soon thereafter, there was the G20 in London. I just had to hit the ground running,
Wow.
In that regard,
Yeah. And that was the end of the Bush era into the Obama era. Wow.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Bush was there, and the next one was Obama.
Did you ever interact with Obama?
So both of them, yeah.
Wow.
Both of them.
The Zuma presidency then begins after the 2009 election.
Yes. So we go into an election, and President Zuma is nominated, is elected by Parliament to become President of the Republic, and he then, remember, so I then have, at that point, I'd served as president, and so I had to retire. And so he then decides, no, I invite you to be the deputy president. So I say, no, well and good, no problem. Yeah. And so I had to serve as deputy president as a retiree, if you understand what I mean, because I'm a former president.
Yeah.
Now I'm serving as deputy president to President Zuma.
Most people go the other way.
The normal way is the opposite direction.
Yeah.
So there were advantages for doing that, because I already had the experience of being president, and so the bulk of the meetings of the cabinet committee and cabinet, I had to chair them as he was finding his footing and so on. And of course, you know, we had a relationship of mutual respect, because he knew, I mean, I knew, you know, the responsibilities of a president, and he had served as deputy president, so he also was well versed with the responsibilities of a deputy president, and so there was a balance. We were able to work, you know, together effectively in that regard.
You're a fascinating person, not only because you've been president, but you've also worked with all the presidents throughout their lives, throughout your life. And I wonder, what do you think are the similarities and differences between them, between Mandela, Mbeki, Zuma, and Ramaphosa, having worked with all of them at different points in their lives?
Well, like every one of us, I mean, they have their strong points and they have their weak points. And when you work as a team, you are effective if you know and understand each other's strong points and weak points, and that your role to complement each other is to undermine each other's weak points, yes, and strengthen the strong points. So, but Mandela, I mean, stood out because he had such experience. I mean, it's enormous experience. Comrade Thabo, I mean, had exposure, international exposure, like, you know, very few people really, yes. And was a technocrat. Comrade Thabo was a technocrat. You know, he comes at issues politically, but, you know, most people who have a political attitude, who are not technocrats, can deal with issues, you know, at a high level. Yes. But Comrade Thabo could drill down into how you operationalize, how do you give effect to this wonderful, you know, framework. So that was his strong point. That was his strong point.
Former President Zuma?
Well, former President Zuma is a very, you know, affable person, where, you know, with good people-to-people relations. I think his weak point is that he creates concentric circles for, you know, consultation and decision making. So you can sit with him in a committee, and his decisions are not informed by that committee. They are informed by another committee outside of that committee. That's a weakness, I think, because in a sense, it undermines consistency.
And I know you haven't necessarily worked with President Ramaphosa on a cabinet level, but where do you think he fits within the presidents we've had, and what are his strengths and weaknesses?
Well, I don't have a practical experience of working with him in the presidency per se, but I've worked with him in the union. Yes. And I can tell you his strong points then, I mean, from my own point of view, was that he had lots of courage. I mean, could take very difficult decisions. When there was, no clear factors giving that kind of direction. And I remember, I mean, I used to think that, oh man, this is a risky decision. But, he would take it, and it worked out at the end, yeah. So that's my experience with him, in the labor front, yeah. But in the presidency, I have no experience really.
You ultimately decided to contest former President Zuma at the Mangaung conference in 2012. Fascinating that Cyril Ramaphosa ended up becoming the deputy president, and your lives have constantly intersected. Talk us through that decision, and how do you look back on the Mangaung conference and your decision on principle, even though you probably knew that the numbers were against you, to contest the Zuma presidency? And were you beginning to have misgivings about the direction of the Zuma presidency at the time?
Yeah, well, the ANC, I mean, constitution stipulates that every member in good standing can nominate whomsoever and can be nominated for whatever position. And that's the culture, that's the tradition in the ANC. So many people struggle with the understanding that the convention was that you don't raise your hand, it's the others who must nominate you. And many people who say, no, democracy doesn't work like that. You've got to raise your hand and then campaign and so on, because that way. But the culture of the ANC was different. I mean, if you look at the Rivonia trialists, they were all leaders in their own right, each one of them, and never really competed for positions. They knew exactly. I mean, what Madiba used to say to us, that when they were in the youth league, when they were young, Walter Sisulu knew exactly what task needed which caliber among them. And he used to say in summary that, Sisulu used to lead us from behind because he knew exactly who must be tasked to perform which function, and was never a threat to any one of us. So that's the culture in the ANC. But of course, when the ANC becomes a governing party, there are other interests which become a factor, particularly if the membership is not rooted and therefore clear as to who among these members can equal the task of giving effect to the resolutions that the ANC takes. So sometimes leadership is decided even before resolutions, whereas it's always important and best for resolutions and policies to be adopted. And then you then say which team can give effect to these policies. So when that happened, I mean, it was clear that there was manipulation of processes. And coming at it, having served as Secretary General and understanding the structures, it was clear, I mean, to me. But I felt that as a matter of principle, it was also important to emphasize that indeed the Constitution means exactly what it says, that each and every member in good standing can nominate whomsoever and be nominated. So the principal approach was that if nominated, I must accept. Yeah.
Feel free not to answer this because I know you don't necessarily want to wade into the political fray, but having worked so closely with former President Zuma right back from the days when you were eventually arrested and leading to your time on Robben Island, working with him after Polokwane in lockstep, what did you make of his decision to leave the ANC and found MK Party?
Well, Sizwe, one of the lessons that were passed on to us is that all progressive causes are informed by love, not hatred. And that any cause that is informed by hatred can never be progressive. Yeah. That's why even when we were oppressed, the message was always emphasized that we must not be like our oppressors. Yeah, because we are better than they are. We must strive to be better than they are. Otherwise, you get stuck in a groove of hatred, and that's never progressive here. That's never progressive. So, in a word, I've never really come to understand how leadership that is elected. Once a leadership is elected, you have to respect the office, regardless of who the incumbents are, as long as they are a product of a democratic process. But I detect deep-seated hatred directed at President Ramaphosa. And I think that's why it became possible for President Zuma to leave the ANC. And it's very specific that the ANC of Ramaphosa. And I've never heard the ANC been characterized that way, because by characterizing it that way, it presupposes that when he was president, it was the ANC of Zuma. And I just shudder. I mean, the thought of assuming that an organization that you found in place, that you inherited, can be your personal property or chattel property like that. I just think that in itself is a revelation here.
Fam, you asked for some SMWX merch and we have delivered. I know you're always looking for ways to help support and grow this channel, so why don't you buy yourself an SMWX hoodie? Super comfy, super warm, and you can represent SMWX. You can check the link down below for how to buy your SMWX hoodie and help build and grow this channel so we can bring you more interviews, more analysis, and more educational insights. Now let's get back to it. Just finally, two further questions before we conclude. The first is your thoughts on this government of national unity that we now have. It seems to me that the ANC has negotiated brilliantly to reposition itself right at the center after what would have been a disappointing election. What are your thoughts? Are you hopeful about the government of national unity, or do you side with some of those within the alliance who have expressed their misgivings about the ANC's partnership with the DA?
Well, for first and foremost, I mean, for any country to succeed, it has to tap into the most talented individuals at its disposal. In other words, we have to strive to find from amongst ourselves the most talented people to lead us. Now, if by default the GNU expands the talent that is harnessed from this nation of ours into a government, we are hopeful that the contributions and the value adds from these diverse individuals coming from different political parties would take us to a higher level and give us an effective government, as it were. But of course, one also observed that they haven't had boss berats among themselves, where they would be able to, through discussion and debate, identify priorities for this GNU. What are the priorities? And I think one of the priorities really should be the land question. Yeah. Because, you know, until we address the land question, conversation of poverty, inequality, and unemployment would forever be abstract. Yeah. So I would hope that, you know, when they go into their boss berats, this is one of the priorities that they would identify. I know that, you know, there are immediate burning issues like crime levels, poor logistics, aging and decaying bulk infrastructure, basic education. You know, we need to fix basic education. And if we understand the damage that actually was done through Bantu education, we would, because access has already been addressed. I mean, more than 90% of the kids who must register at grade R do so. However, we have not produced sufficient teachers for taking these children through basic education level. We're struggling in that regard. We're struggling. And that's why there's a preference for former, you know, white schools and so on, because of the caliber of the teachers there. And in the public schools in the townships and so on, parents prefer to move their children out of those schools. And so we ought to identify that as a priority, to say we're going to produce teachers of the highest caliber, so that these public schools can be as good as the private schools. If we were to do that, I think we can end up with a greater, nation building and social cohesion if we were to do that. Part of the problem with our education system now at basic level is that the assumption is that every child who registers at grade R is going to become an academician. So none of these children are going to be plumbers, mechanics, engineers, and so on. So then you see the system takes them through, and it is only when they drop out at grade 9, 10, 11, 12 that we then direct them to TVET colleges. So the way it is happening, it's as though TVETs are for those who fail to attain university entrance, you see. Whereas in other countries, I mean in Finland, they identify the teachers, the early childhood development center teachers are trained to identify the strong points of these children at that early stage, whether they go the academic route or the skills route. And in a country like Germany, it's actually 40% academic and 60% TVETs and these technology colleges, you see. And it is only once these children have qualified with the diploma from University of Technology that they then are credited towards an academic degree. So I think we are at a point where we need to invest a little bit more effort and resources in fixing our basic education, so that there are children who are really prepared from the outset to go that route. And it would enable us, I mean, as a country that in terms of technology, we are latecomers, to leapfrog, so to speak. So that's my. I think the GNU would do us a great favor if they were to go into Bosberats and stay away from the microphones, because the noises, I mean, don't help.
Well, we're here at the Motlanthe Foundation. The foundation does great work in bringing together people from our society to think about how we can achieve inclusive growth as an economy. What are your hopes for the foundation in closing and for the future? And are we going to get a book one of these days?
Well, the foundation, even now, I mean, works with a school in Yule Street and another one from Dobsonville called Fort High School. And they spend weekends with these children at number 22 Sloan, on Sloan. They introduce them to robotics and other digital skills. So the foundation is going in that direction, actually. We think it can make a humble contribution towards, the development of young children from poor backgrounds.
Well, book? Will we get a book one of these days?
I don't know about a book because it would be difficult for one to, I don't know what to, commit to paper, whether it's memoirs or autobiography or modules that you put together on various subjects here. I just think that if one was to write a book, it must be a book that can serve as a text for education or something. Yeah. Otherwise, I don't know. Yeah.
Well, President Motlanthe, just to thank you so much, not just for being part of this interview, but for your contributions to our country as an activist, someone who's sacrificed so much of his life, as someone in government, and now as a former president with your foundation, as someone who we look up to as a country, no matter our political persuasion, and someone who restores our faith in South Africa. So it's been a great honor to speak to you, and thank you for all that you are and all that you represent.
Thank you, Sizu. I can only say keep up the good work. Yeah.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
Like, share, subscribe. Thank you for joining us again, and keep it locked on SMWX. Aye.
Na na na